Um, so, okay. So I'm the sexual assault response team coordinator for Family Services in Dutchess County. Um, I started in 2004 as a rape crisis advocate and worked in several positions since then, and ended up with a sexual assault response team as I worked many years with rape crisis victims of rape, and found that this was really my passion, and I wanted to work in the systems response. So right now, the system response consists of law enforcement, um, advocates, hospital, prosecution. So we work together to try to work with the systems in Dutchess County to ensure that the response to sexual assault is consistent and victim-centered and trauma-informed. So here's some of the goals for our training today. We want to examine and look at the myths surrounding sexual assault, which unfortunately still exist today. Also, talk about and understand the prevalence of sexual assault and how it's exacerbated through rape culture. We're going to identify different types of sexual assault and understand the experience that victims go through when they are sexually assaulted. Learn what survivors need to heal and how we can help them heal, and also identify barriers to reporting that victims go through when they're sexually assaulted. So during this presentation, feel free to write anything in the chat if you have any questions or make any comments as we go along. We are going to be going through a true and false quiz, and I'll have you write into the chat box your answers to the true and false questions, and then we will discuss those. Okay, so if everyone can type in the answer to this, and if you have any comments related to your answer, please type those in also. Okay, so I see false, which is correct. It is false. Many people think that it's stranger danger, the person jumping out of the dark alleyway, but really most people, and I keep track of who the perpetrators are in Dutchess County, and most people are raped by somebody that they're acquainted with. Individuals who rape do so because they cannot find a consenting sexual partner. Correct. So it is false. What it is about is power and control, and it is used through a sexual act, but it is not about because they cannot find somebody who consents. If a victim does not say no or does not fight back, it is not considered sexual assault. Right, so that is false once again. So many times in the past, I've had people I have met at the hospital that have said, I am, I feel like maybe I consented, or I didn't say no, so was it sexual assault? So, even victims themselves feel that way. They're not sure because they didn't fight back that it wasn't actually sexual assault. But many people don't fight back because they're afraid they're going to get hurt, and they're afraid, they're trying to keep themselves safe. It is common for both child and adult victims of sexual assault to wait some time before telling somebody about the assault. true. Jenny, you were my star student today. Yes, it is very common. Many people don't come forward for years. So as we've seen with the Me Too movement lately, you know, many people have said, why are they coming forward 25 years later? It doesn't make sense. But it is very common for people not to talk to anybody about sexual assault for many reasons. They feel that people aren't going to believe them, which is many times the case, or they're embarrassed. They feel like it's their fault, they're ashamed. So there's many reasons why people don't come forward. And with the Me Too movement, as you've seen, the more people came forward, more and more people came forward. It encouraged others to come forward and gave them the courage to speak up. The issue of consent is crucial in cases involving sexual assault. So in other words, when this goes forward to prosecution, how important is it to decide whether or not there was consent? So yes, this is true. Many times, you know, people will say, well, I didn't consent, but then the person who was accused said yes, you know, they did consent in this case. And, you know, that is a tough thing to prove when it goes forward to prosecution about whether or not somebody consented, because we know when somebody is raped, it's not happening in front of a lot of people. It's usually just those two people that it's happening with. The medication to prevent HIV can only be provided within 72 hours of an assault. True. Yes. In the past, it was 36 hours, and the medication has improved over the years. When I started in 2004, it was 36 hours, which was only 1.5 days that people had to get to the hospital after an assault to get that HIV medication. So that's important to know, because if you ever have anybody that you know that this has happened to and they want to get that HIV medication, going to the hospital is really important, and getting that medication. You know, we even tell people, you know, if you go to the police station and we find out it happened, you know, 2 days ago, we want to get that person to the hospital so they can get the medications they need, and then they can make that report also at the hospital. Roofies like GHB and Rofinol are the most common date rape drugs. This is always a tricky one. Okay, so this is actually false, and most people think that it's true. Does anybody know what the #1 date rape drug is? So it's actually alcohol, and people don't usually think of alcohol as a drug, but the #1 rape drug is alcohol. And we see that it's very common when I do my statistics for the county, how many people are actually sexually assaulted and there's alcohol involved. And that does not mean that alcohol causes rape, but many times it is used in sexual assault. I've had, you know, different perpetrators of crimes say to the prosecutor, you know, she was the drunkest person in the room, and that's why I picked her. Individuals are required by law to report a rape to the police. So this is false. Someone said that's a tough question. Why is that? Well, a child report would be different. So in other words, I'm talking about people who are 18 years old and older, and it's not a CPS report. So people who go to the hospital many times, they're afraid to go because they think they're going to be forced to make a police report, and they don't want to. So nobody forces anyone to make a police report at the hospital. The only time a hospital is required to make the police report is if there was a gun or a knife weapon involved in the assault. So if it's a child and it's a guardian of somebody, that's a mandated report to the CPS hotline. A 12-year-old is able to consent to all decisions involving their sexual health after a rape. So this is true. And many people find this surprising, and I did too when I started working in this area. So 12 year and up, they can go to the hospital, and this is, I want to be clear about this. If it's not somebody who's in the household who is a guardian of them, if it is, then that would be a CPS report, and we would have to call the police. We would have to either call the police or we would have to call the 1-800 child abuse hotline. If a 12-year-old is sexually assaulted by a friend of a friend, and they come to the hospital and they say, I don't want you to call my parents, we don't call them. If I don't want you to call the police, we can't call them. The sexual health law, that 12 and up, they are allowed to consent to any decisions involving their sexual health. So if you think of it in the way of Planned Parenthood, where they can go to Planned Parenthood and get the medications that they need, it's kind of the same idea. We want them to come forward to get help after a sexual assault, but we do not force them to call the police or anything. So that being said, because this kind of freaks everybody out, I would say in the past few years working in rape crisis that most kids do show up with parents, or they call their parents and want them to know. But when I first started in this work, there were many times that I would meet a 14-year-old at the hospital. They were sexually assaulted by a friend, and they didn't want anyone to know. And I wasn't able to call the police or do anything like that. False reports of sexual assault are a common occurrence. So this is false. A lot of people think that false reports are very common, and everyone is making false reports of sexual assault, but research has shown that it's really only between 2 and 8% of sexual assault reports are false. Okay, so I want to go back to the 12 and up piece. So if anyone wanted to get information on that, they can Google minors' rights and privacy with sexual assault, and a whole brochure type thing comes up, and you can read that. So let's talk about the sexual assault movement, how it started. It's hard to talk about sexual assault one-on-one without talking about this. So it all really came to light when the feminist movement came to be in the 70s. Self-help books came out. The realization that oppression is mainly the cause of sexual violence, including sexism, and also that broad social change is necessary, and a lot of activism started around sexual violence. So sexual assault movement, you know, basically, I mean, you can read this. It will explain, you know, 40 years it's only been that it really was an organized effort to get the sexual assault movement off the ground. And I believe the rape crisis program at Family Services wasn't in place until 96, maybe a little earlier. So it really wasn't that long ago when you think about it. So it started as a grassroots feminist group, were organized and led to the creation of the first rape crisis centers. So does anybody want to try their hand at a definition of rape culture? Doesn't have to be perfect. If you want to put something in the chat box, if not, I'll go on to the next slide with the definition. So basically, we pretty much live in a culture of rape. Society or environment, I can't even see this, whose prevailing social attitudes have the effect of normalizing or trivializing sexual assault and abuse. So our society, many times in the media, is saturated with sexualized images of women being raped and tortured, or which reduces a woman's value to sexuality, which is a big part of rape culture. Jokes people make about rape, violent images, movies, many movies have a culture of rape in them. So the next slide might be a little disturbing. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So what is this image portraying a woman as? I don't know if anyone can see it. It says, you mean a woman can open it? Right. So gender weak, helpless, and this is probably something from around the 50s or late 50s, 60s. Just some other images. And the first one, as you can see, is an image for Burger King. And the second and third one are both advertisements for perfumes. And when I looked at all these images, I came across so many more. We see it all the time. We see it in commercial, in advertisements, everywhere. So we live in a culture which objectifies women and sexualizes them. And also adds to violence against women. So sexualization and violence. And this is actually an ad for, can anyone guess what this ad is for? It's actually an ad for the suit that the man is wearing. So, women are used in, sexualized and violent ways to portray, different things in advertisements, which adds to sexualization and violence against women. And I will be clear that it, obviously sexual assault does not only happen to women, it happens to everybody. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So I want to go through these three terms because many times people mix them up, sexual violence, sexual assault, and rape. So sexual violence is more of an umbrella term and includes sexual assault and rape. So it's any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, trafficking, coercion, regardless of the relationship to the victim and in any setting. Sexual assault is the actual act of assaulting somebody in a sexual way. It occurs against the person's will, involves situations in which the victim does not or cannot consent to the sexual activity which is occurring. And rape. So here it talks about all different things rape can be. Rape definition is it's forced or coerced penetration. Years ago, the definition changed, I would say, about 3 or 4 years ago, where it only included women. It was sexual penetration for the penis to the vulva. And they changed that definition because, as we know, not only women are raped, and the definition now includes everybody. So basically, sexual assault in any non-consensual sexual act in which is forced upon a person. Love or lust does not motivate people to sexually assault. It's an act of power and control where sex is used as the weapon. So here's some more facts about rape. Fastest growing unreported crime. 1 in 10 rapes are reported, and only 3% of rapes of those who are reported are ever convicted or spend a day in jail. So that's, think about 100 rapes, 3 people. And when I started in 2004, that was the exact percentage of people who were convicted at that time too. So not much has changed as far as that is concerned. 19 out of 20 rapists still on the street and will commit 11 to 12 acts before they are caught. So most rapes are committed by males, but that doesn't mean all males rape. It just means that the few that do have a lot of victims. So rape can happen to anybody, men, women, trans folks, all races and cultures. It's been documented against people as young as 2 months old and as old as 97 years old. And the reason those numbers are in there, because in the Center for Victim Safety and Court Rape Crisis Program, we have had those ages. So consent, I want to talk a little bit about consent. This is the legal definition of consent. Affirmative consent is a knowing, voluntary, and mutual decision among all participants to engage in sexual activity. It can be given by words or actions, as long as those words or actions create clear permission regarding willingness to engage in the sexual activity. So, you know, certain people cannot consent, those who are under the age of 17, people who have a disability who may not be able to consent. So there are many different ways that people try to get around this, but there is the legal definition, and this is what has to be fought in court with prosecution. I'm going to show you a little video, and many of you have probably seen it already. I'm trying to move this GoToMeeting. There it is. Okay.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go,
Uh-oh.
oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. But then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add them. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
So that was kind of a silly way of looking at consent. But believe it or not, we have many situations where we've shown up at the hospital and somebody has said, I don't remember anything, and they were sexually assaulted. Whether it be alcohol or some kind of drugs that were put in their drink. So it is common that it happens that, we've had people come to the hospital and say, I was with this person, woke up in their apartment, but I don't remember anything after just getting one drink. So unfortunately, things like that do happen. So it's, we want to look at it as if somebody does not have enthusiastic consent, that is not consent unless they are enthusiastic about having sex. And when I do trainings at colleges and high schools, we talk about that. Okay, so I want to talk about different types of sexual assault. Here's the different types of sexual assault. If does anybody have any on there that they are unsure about? I'm not going to go through and read them all, but sometimes there's one or two that people are unsure of what they mean. So one of them that, people have an issue with is the ritual abuse. So that's basically a repeated abuse which occurs in a precise and distinct manner, remains constant, and a belief that it is somehow cleansing, usually like a ceremonial type thing. We don't see that a lot, thank goodness, but in other cultures, that may be very common. So I want to talk a little bit about understanding the experience of being sexually assaulted. There's emotional reactions, physical, the concerns of rape victims, and the impact on the relationship. Can somebody type in, anybody want to type in any kind of emotional reactions they think somebody might have to being sexually assaulted? Shame, that's a big one. Sadness. So here's the list. It could be many things. I have gone to the hospital and met with rape victims who, their reaction seems a little abnormal to some people, but they might be sitting there telling jokes. So any reaction is pretty much normal. You can have one of these, you can have many of those. A big one is loss of control. People feel very out of control, and this is not only with sexual violence, but any kind of a victimization that somebody experiences. So one of the things we always try to do is give that person back as much control as we can. So we let them make all the decisions going forward. Do they want to report to the police? Do they want to have an advocate with them? If they don't, we leave. We let them make all the decisions. Who do they want in the room? Do they not want to have an exam? Do they want to have an exam? It's all up to that person. So we give them back the control. And that's a very important thing to do for people who have been sexually assaulted, is make sure they get back the control and let them make decisions. Another one that people always wonder about is concern for the rapist. So, of course, we talked about before, the most common sexual assault offender is usually someone the person knows. So it's difficult, for somebody to, press charges against somebody who raped them who they know. And they're also worried about what's going to happen to them. And that's also very hard for people to understand. But it's very similar in domestic violence. It's somebody, who you cared for and loved who did this to you. So it's important to understand that and respect that. As far as, risk of suicide, alcohol, drug abuse, anger, I had a woman call up my hotline one day and say, I think I'm going crazy. She was probably in her 60s, and she said, I'm always angry. I had problems with people all my life. I was drinking for a while, and when I asked her if she ever had any kind of trauma in her life, she said, well, I was raped when I was 18, but that doesn't make any difference. So, for all those years, she never got any help related to that rape. And for years, she was suffering all these different issues in her life. And, I explained to her that a lot of the things she's talking about are very common reactions to being raped. And she was actually, happy. She said, I'm not crazy, this is normal. So the best you can do to normalize someone's feelings when they're going through something like this is very important to them. So can anyone put in any physical reactions you might see with somebody who's sexually assaulted? Okay, so one of the most common ones we hear is that they want to take a shower right away. They feel dirty, shortness of breath, anxiety, pain, changes in sleeping and eating patterns, very common. Sometimes people have, ongoing pain in the area that, we had one person who was held down by her shoulders, so she kept having like ongoing pain in her shoulders from that. So here are some concerns of rape survivors. They're afraid their family and friends are going to find out, people thinking it was their fault. And these are all pretty legitimate too. People outside of their family finding out, their name being publicized in the media, becoming pregnant if you're female, contracting an STD or HIV, or the person who offended you will be released from jail or prison. So, some of these things we can help them with as advocates. We can make sure that their name isn't publicized. Usually it is not anymore. And they can, take medications to prevent the other things. So rape has an impact on people's relationships, trusting people again, sexual dysfunction. They have issues in their relationship that they're in, vicarious traumatization, that, people in their family who are around them or friends are traumatized from this also. When anybody is a victim of a crime of any type, it affects everybody around them also. and the drain on financial and emotional resources. So many times they lose their job, or they quit their job, or they quit school. So it really does have a domino effect on all areas of their life. So here's some factors that affect their reactions. So what kind of ego strength do they have? What kind of self-confidence do they have? Will make a difference in how they react. What social support they have, even from, police, from advocates, from the systems, from friends, the resources they have available to them. So in other words, if somebody is already in poverty and something like this happens to them, they lose their job and they're already poor, that will have an effect on their finances. The information about sexual assault and the myths, the extent that they adhere to the myths. So many people have this embedded in them growing up, that we believe these things. Oh, well, you shouldn't have been drinking, you shouldn't have worn that outfit. How much do they believe those myths themselves? The social status and position, and also, like we said before, the relationship to the perpetrator. So some of the barriers to reporting to police, many times people are afraid to report to the police. They're afraid they won't be believed. They're embarrassed. They're ashamed. They may have been using drugs or alcohol. They think they're going to get in trouble for that. And by the way, police in the area understand that, say it's a college student and they were using some kind of a drug, the police aren't going to be concentrating on that. They're going to be concentrating on the sexual assault. So we always reaffirm that with clients when we meet with them, that, they're not going to get in trouble for that piece, that, they're going to concentrate on the sexual assault. Maybe they had previous negative experiences with law enforcement, so they're afraid to report. And also being afraid of the assailant, which is very legitimate, or having concern for the assailant. They don't want to get them in trouble, like I said earlier. Some of the survivors' needs, obviously someone to believe them. It's a known fact. Research has shown that people who are believed by the first person they tell, related to people who are not believed, will heal better from the assault if they are believed. Emotional support and acceptance. I tell advocates when we do trainings, we never ask why questions. Why did you go there? Why did you stay out so late? Because that right away makes the person defensive and feel like they are blaming them. And that will shut people down right away. If somebody is doing that to them, I've seen people just shut down. They don't want to talk anymore. They don't want to do anything, go to the police. So it's important to support them and believe them. Reassurance about how they handled the attack. Like I said earlier, people thinking they should have, fought back or something. Want to reassure them that they were trying to keep themselves safe. Give them options. Aid in reporting the crime if they choose. Calling the hotline and getting an advocate who can accompany them and support them. And a medical or forensic exam if they choose. So medical forensic exam, we always encourage people to go to the hospital and get at least a medical exam. A forensic exam is, focused on getting evidence. We do encourage people that if they think they might be reporting, to get that forensic exam, because even if they decide to report in 2 weeks, the forensic exam is there and they hold on to it. And then they can release it when they're ready to release it. So here are some quick statistics. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 7 men will be a victim of sexual assault sometime in their lifetime. Every hour, 78 women are raped in the world. That is more than 1 woman a minute. Let's see. Like it said, 78% of sexual assault victims know their perpetrator. Let me just get rid of this for a second. Okay. 94% of all sexual assaults are against female victims aged 12 or older, but we know it happens to everybody. 85% of child sexual abuse cases, the offender is a family member, known authority figure, and 44% of lesbians and 61% of bisexual women experience rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, compared to 35% of straight women. And underneath, 26% of gay men and 37% of bisexual men experience rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner, compared to 29% of straight men. And 46% of bisexual women have been raped, compared to 17% of straight women and 13% of lesbians. So you can see that the numbers are extremely high with the LGBTQ community. And many times, you know, they don't come forward because they're afraid that, you know, they won't get the treatment they want, or they don't trust the system. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? And that is Bosch. He's the facility dog who belongs to the district attorney's office, and he helps people who are victims of crime, including children. Okay, I see something in the chat. Thank you. You saw Bosch. Everyone knows Bosch. And I just wanted to put up, there's the Center for Victim Safety and Support, and we offer 24-hour hotline, which is right there for rape crisis. We have domestic violence hotline also, and we offer 3 months free counseling, assistance with Office of Victim Services, which is up in Albany and can assist in expenses related to the crime. And we have support groups and also accompaniment to hospitals, police stations, and anywhere you have to go related to a crime. So thank you very much. And there's my email if you have any questions. Okay.